And now, in the absence of estrogens, if there's still a signal to be storing fat, more of that relatively is going to be stored like her male counterpart, which is going to be more central fat storage and hypertrophic fat cells rather than subcutaneous fat storage, or the fat storage right beneath the skin, and hyperplastic fat cells, which is small but more multiple. So the woman transitioning, again, to maybe put a fine point on it all, it is, I think it is still an opportunity to get lean. Even, I mean, as crazy as that may sound, I don't think it's hopeless. I think it is an opportunity to leverage the changes that are happening, and maybe even capitalize on those to be leaner than before. There might be a benefit to just the steadiness that comes from that transition period, where you don't have these really dramatic changes in hormones. Maybe there's an opportunity for her to get into habits that aren't at the whims of these hormones and the wild
Mhm.
changes that she's had before then. As much as this transition period is so often reviled and hated, it is a natural thing. And I can't help but think this is how humans have been built. It happens. There's
Mhm.
a reason for it. It can't all be bad. And maybe that's just an overly naive thing where I'm always determined to see the body as having been built as a rational series of events. Yeah, so estradiol is the main estrogen that is helping the woman store fat at a limited amount and in a healthier way. And so it is the loss of estradiol that then accounts for the seemingly harmful changes in fat
Mhm.
metabolism. As you note, other estrogens are just weaker, and
Mhm.
they might. I have to speculate. They might have a similar effect, and maybe it's just that there's not enough of that signal anymore. Or it might be that because that is in fact a different hormone, it might not have the same effect at all. I don't know.
Mhm. And I never learned this in nursing or my nurse practitioner program. I learned this many years later, is that, the first 2 weeks of our menstrual cycles, this is when estradiol predominates, and we are much more insulin sensitive
Hmm.
versus the latter part of our menstrual cycle prior to menstruation, when progesterone predominates and
Yep.
we are tired and cranky and we become more insulin resistant. And
Yep.
so, is it any surprise we get these cravings for foods that may or may not be in our best interest to consume? But I love just how the body is trying to, intuitively gravitate towards exactly the way that it needs to work efficiently. I think, unfortunately, what's happened is that we have these gross abnormalities in our sex hormone balancing, whether it's a byproduct of, or, synthetic contraceptives or PCOS or infertility or any number. I know in a podcast I listened to yesterday, you were saying the term estrogen dominance isn't really a scientific term, and seeing a lot of the influence of toxins in our environment, endocrine disrupting chemicals, how a lot of
Yep.
people's hormones, their sex hormones, can really get offline.
I think of that more actually in the context of my children, my little girls and my little boy, especially. I am very mindful of the plastics that we have that they're drinking water from. I'm very mindful of the detergents that we're using and perhaps the pesticides or other chemicals, many of which remarkably act as estrogens, or they have these estrogen mimetic effects. That's something I'm very mindful of. I don't want my daughters having too much estrogens. I don't want them to develop physically too early, not only because of the social ramifications, but also the genuine health concerns with
Mhm.
increased risks in breast and uterine cancers. And my little boy, of course, I don't want him to be developing in an environment of high estrogen activity.